You know what's funny is there was a time not too long ago when I didn't even know that reselling existed. If you had told me back then that one day I'd sell thousands of clothing items online, pay off my house, and build a business that let me work from home and help thousands of other people do the same, I probably would have laughed. Not because I didn't want that life, but honestly, I didn't think that it was possible. Looking back now, I realized something. I almost missed all of it. Not because I didn't work hard enough, but because I believed things that simply weren't true. And if you've ever thought about reselling, maybe you've watched a few videos, maybe you've wondered if this could actually work for you. There's a really good chance that you've believed some of these same things too. So today I want to tell you the story about what almost stopped me and why every single one of those beliefs turned out to be wrong. Because maybe, just maybe, the only thing that's standing between you and something completely different is the story that you've been telling yourself. Now, before reselling, my life looked completely different. I had gone to school for engineering.
Engineers.
I did what I thought I was supposed to do, get the degree, start the career. And then we had our first child. And like a lot of moms, everything changed. I left engineering because I wanted to be home more. And I eventually started teaching as an adjunct engineering professor. On paper, it sounded like the perfect compromise. I could still teach, I could still use my degree, I could still contribute financially. But the reality is that things looked different. Every class meant that I had to arrange childcare. I had to drive back and forth, planning everything around somebody else's schedule, trading my time for money. And at the end of the month, after everything, I remember thinking, I'm basically making what I could be making working at Starbucks. It wasn't that I hated teaching, I actually loved teaching, loved my students, but it was the fact that no matter how hard I worked, it just felt like we were never getting ahead, that we were barely keeping up. I was clipping coupons, watching every single dollar, carefully thinking about anything before purchasing. Maybe you've been there, maybe you're there right now. You're doing all of the things that you're supposed to be doing, and somehow it feels like you're never getting ahead. That was me. I wasn't looking for a mansion or luxury vacations or some crazy millionaire lifestyle. I just wanted breathing room. I wanted to be able to stop stressing over every single purchase. I wanted to be able to be home with my family and to be able to enjoy life. I wanted work that fit around my life instead of making my life fit around work. And at the time, I had absolutely no idea that selling used clothes would become the answer.
Didn't see that coming.
And then one day, a friend happened to mention selling clothes on eBay. And I remember thinking, wait, people buy used clothes online? I had sold textbooks throughout college. And honestly, I assumed maybe she had been making a little spending money here and there, maybe enough to buy a few groceries, enough to be able to maybe pay for a vacation once a year. I never imagined that people were building real income doing this. It sounded interesting, but not really serious, and certainly not like something that you could build a future on, that you could build consistency on. So I did what I always do, and probably what you're doing as well. I started researching, I started watching videos, reading articles. I tried to understand how this whole thing worked. And the more that I learned, the more one question kept coming back into my mind. Why would somebody pay $20 plus shipping for a used shirt when they could just go to the store? They could just run to Target. That was my thought. That's what I was wondering. And maybe you've thought the same thing too. I couldn't make sense of it. Why buy something that's already been worn? Why pay shipping? Why not just go to the store?
Why?
And at the time, it felt like a completely reasonable question. And honestly, it's one of the biggest reasons that I almost never started in the first place. Because if people weren't willing to buy used clothes online, then this whole concept just fell apart. But here's what I didn't understand. I was thinking like somebody walking through a thrift store, not like somebody who's shopping online and shopping with intent. Those are two completely different mindsets. When you're walking through a thrift store, when you're browsing at a garage sale, you're just looking, you're just hoping. Maybe you'll stumble across something, maybe you won't. It's almost like this treasure hunt. But when somebody goes to eBay or to Poshmark or Depop, they're not just browsing, they're searching, and they're searching with intent. They've already decided before they've ever even gotten on the platform that they want something. Maybe it's a specific Pendleton shirt. Maybe it's a certain Harley t-shirt that's vintage. Maybe it's a pair of boots that they used to own 20 years ago, or a jacket that's not made anymore, a favorite pair of jeans in their exact size. And they're typing that item into the search bar because they already know that they want it. They're not just hoping that they're gonna stumble across it. They're trying to find it. And that intent is what changes everything. Because of that intent, they're willing to pay more. They're paying for that convenience. They're paying because they don't want to spend the next 3 weekends driving around to garage sales or thrift stores hoping that they're going to get lucky. They're paying because they want that item and they want it delivered to their front door. Once I understood that, the entire business suddenly made sense. People weren't buying used clothes because they were cheap. They were buying exactly what they wanted. And that was a light bulb moment for me.
That makes sense.
It completely changed how I looked at reselling, and it might change the way you think about it too. And once I finally understood why people bought used clothes online, another question immediately took its place. Even if people really were buying all this stuff online, could I actually count on it? Or was it just getting lucky once in a while? Because that question almost stopped me before I ever even listed my first item. Even if people were really buying used clothes online, could this ever become consistent? Because those are two very different questions. One is, can you make money? The other is, can you count on it? Can you count on it consistently? And that second question, that's what scared me a whole lot more because I wasn't looking for a hobby. I wasn't looking for just side hustle income. I wasn't looking just to make a little money here and there. I wanted something that was dependable. You see, every month I knew exactly what my adjunct paycheck was going to be. It wasn't much, but at least I knew that it was coming. There was comfort in that. There was predictability in that. And the idea of walking away from something predictable for something that might or might not work felt incredibly risky. Maybe you felt that as well. Maybe you've thought, what if I put in all this effort and it doesn't work? Or what if I have one good month and then nothing? Those were all of the questions running through my head because I wasn't looking for excitement. I was looking for stability. So I started small. I just started listing one item and then another and reinvesting as I went along. I wasn't trying to build a business just yet. I was trying to answer one simple question. Could I actually sell something and make it consistent? And I remember getting my first sale. We were walking through Costco just like we did every other Sunday. And that ding came on my phone that I had made my first sale of a pair of Levi's jeans that I had just listed, had just gotten that week. And I was so excited, yes, because of the money, but more so because I realized that somebody on the other side of the world searched for this. They had found my listing and they trusted me enough to buy it. And I remember packing that first order, double checking everything, wondering if I was doing it all right. And looking back now, it's kind of funny. At the time, I felt like it was such a big deal. Now shipping takes me just a couple of minutes. But back then, it felt huge because it wasn't just a package, it was proof. Proof that this actually worked. And then something happened. The next sale came in, and then another, and then another. Not every day, but they started becoming more and more consistent. And I started paying attention. I started noticing patterns. I started learning. And I started realizing that some things sold faster than others, some brands did better than others, some styles did better than others, and photos mattered. And every single sale taught me something. And slowly, very slowly, I stopped feeling like I was guessing and I started feeling like I was learning a skill. As sales started becoming consistent to the point of having sales every single day that I could count on. And that's an important distinction because people often look at successful resellers and think that they're lucky. And I'll tell you the truth is that luck has not a whole lot to do with it.
It's not luck.
The more that I learned, the better decisions that I made. And the better decisions that I made, the more consistent that sales became. That's not luck, that's experience. And I'll never forget the first morning I woke up, looked at my phone, and saw that I had sales coming in overnight. It was that realization that people could buy things while I was sleeping. That had never happened before. Teaching didn't do that, engineering didn't do that. Nobody was paying me while I slept. But now money had come in while I wasn't working. And it was one of those moments where this light bulb just goes on and you start realizing that this works differently. The goal isn't to get paid for your time, it's to build something that keeps working for you even when you finished your day's work. And that was a completely different way of thinking for me than anything I've ever experienced before. And a little while later, after that, we went on vacation. And honestly, I wasn't expecting a whole lot. I figured sales would probably stop. After all, I wasn't sourcing, I wasn't listing, I wasn't actively working. But when we got home, I checked my account and I had made around $700 just in the few days that we were gone. And I remember thinking, how is this even possible? Because this business didn't completely stop just because I stopped working for a few days. Now, before somebody misunderstands me, this is what I consider semi-passive income. I'm not saying that you're going to be able to sit on a beach forever and make money indefinitely. That is not how reselling works. You absolutely have to put in the work. You have to source, list, ship. But I realized that I could do it on my own time, around my own schedule, that I could build something that could continue to pay me tomorrow and next week and the next month. And that was completely different from every other job that I had. It wasn't about the money, it was about the predictability. I could finally see how this could become something bigger. Not because every single item was worth hundreds of dollars, not because every day was perfect, but because I could repeat the process. It was a repeatable process. And that's when I stopped looking at every individual sale and started looking at the system as a whole. Source good inventory, list consistently, improve a little every week, repeat over and over again. That simple process changed my entire financial future. And if you're watching this because you're wondering whether this could actually work for you, I put together something for you that I wish that I had when I was getting started. And it's a free reseller checklist. It walks you through exactly what you need, what you don't, and the first steps that I'd take if I were starting over again today. You can download it with the link below. It's completely free and I'll send it right over. Now, once I realized this could actually become consistent income, I ran into another problem. I thought I knew exactly what I was supposed to buy. And honestly, that almost convinced me that reselling was never gonna work for me. You see, before I ever even walked into that first thrift store, I had done all of the research. I had watched the videos, read the blog posts, downloaded brand lists. I was determined to be prepared. And I remember printing out those lists, studying them, memorizing them. I felt confident. I knew that I was going to walk into that thrift store and leave with hundreds of dollars in my arms. Instead, I walked in thinking, I've got this. I know exactly what I'm looking for. Or at least I thought I did. I walked down every aisle, checked every rack, looked through everything. And I didn't end up finding a single one of those brands. None. Not a single one. And I left so discouraged. I remember feeling so down, thinking that this is never going to work for me.
It's disappointing.
I thought that the people that were doing this, it must work where they live, but it would never work where I live. And if you've ever walked out of the thrift store feeling disappointed, thinking everyone else has better stores or better inventory or better luck, I completely understand because that's exactly how I felt too. Because everyone that I had been listening to basically said the same thing, that you needed luxury brands, designer handbags, high-end shoes. They'd show walking into a thrift store and then pulling out something worth $200 like it happened every Tuesday. And when I couldn't find those things, I assumed that I had either failed or that I lived in the wrong place. And looking back, it wasn't that I was missing inventory. It was that I was measuring success the wrong way. You see, what nobody explained to me was that most successful resellers don't build their business around unicorn $100, $200 finds. Sure, that does happen maybe every once in a while. They're fun, they're great YouTube videos, but that's not what usually pays the bills. What pays the bills is finding things that you can count on, things that you can recognize immediately, things that you know that you can walk into the thrift store and find. Things that you know buyers are searching for again and again. And that realization changed everything because instead of hunting for just one $200 item, I started building the business around $25, $30, $50, $60 items. That's where consistency comes from. Instead of searching for brands, I started paying attention to what people actually wanted, what they were actually buying. Things like vintage clothes, Y2K styles, outdoor gear, workwear. Comfort brands, unique styles, certain fabrics, things that people couldn't just walk into Target and easily replace. And something interesting happened. The more that I learned, the more valuable inventory seemed to appear around me. Not because the thrift store suddenly got better, but because I got better. My eyes got better, and I started seeing things differently. I started seeing different opportunities. And that might be one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this business is that opportunity is often sitting right in front of us. We might just not recognize it yet. And when you learn something new, the world can start looking completely different. I also realized that people making the most money weren't necessarily finding the rarest things. They simply knew what everyone else was overlooking. Think about that. If everybody recognized value, there wouldn't be any opportunity left. And that opportunity exists because most people simply don't recognize it. That's true in reselling and honestly is true in life. Then there was shipping. And if I'm being honest, this was one of the most intimidating things as a newbie. I pictured stacks of boxes, complicated postage, expensive equipment, special printers. I imagined making mistakes, sending things to the wrong address. I worried about terrible feedback and returns, and it all felt overwhelming. And if you've never shipped anything before, it probably sounds overwhelming to you.
It's overwhelming.
Now, when I started, I didn't have a thermal printer. I didn't have a fancy shipping station. I didn't have shelves full of supplies. I printed right on regular paper, cut them out with scissors, taped them to the package, all in the middle of my kitchen. That was it. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Looking back, it's funny because I thought I needed so much more than I actually did. And sometimes we convince ourselves that we need to get all of the right equipment in order to get started. But most of the time, we just need to start, and everything else will come in time. Today, shipping is honestly easier than it's ever been. Technology is better. Labels are easier. The process is smoother. But the biggest lesson wasn't about shipping. It was realizing that I had been making it a much bigger deal in my head than what it actually was. Then came another excuse. For a while, I convinced myself that something else was the problem. I thought, sure, this works for people who live in the right place. I watched YouTubers sourcing in Denver, finding incredible Patagonia, the North Face, amazing ski brands, things that I almost never saw. And I remember thinking, well, of course it works for them. They're just lucky. And maybe you've caught yourself doing that too. You're looking at somebody else's success and assuming that they have advantages that you don't. Maybe they have better thrift stores, better donations, more wealthy neighbors, better brands. But then something happened that completely changed how I looked at it. You see, every place has its own opportunity. Now, one of my members lives in a community where a motorcycle rally happens every year. Guess what shows up in her thrift stores? Leather jackets, leather vests, motorcycle gear, things that I almost never see where I live. Where I live, I have different opportunities. Things like vintage Boeing sweatshirts, Pacific Northwest brands, regional tourist pieces, and things somebody in Florida will probably never run across. And somebody in Florida, they're probably finding things that I'd love to have. And that's when I realized that I had been comparing somebody else's opportunities to my own instead of learning my own market. Every town has something interesting. Every city, every region, every rural area has something. You don't need somebody else's thrift stores. You need to learn your own. And once I stopped wishing that I lived somewhere else and started learning what buyers wanted from where I actually lived, that's when things changed. When I look back now, it's almost funny because none of those things that almost stopped me actually did. None of them were the real obstacle. The real obstacle was what I believed. I believed that people wouldn't buy used clothes. I believed that I could never have consistent income doing this. I believed that everybody else had already found the good stuff. I believed that I needed luxury brands, that shipping would be overwhelming, that I lived in the wrong place. And underneath all of those was one bigger belief.
This isn't gonna work for me.
And I think that's the belief that keeps a lot of people stuck. Because here's what I've learned. Every single person who's built something meaningful, they started before they knew exactly what they were doing. There wasn't some magical moment when they suddenly felt ready. I hate to break it to you, but that moment's probably never gonna come. They started out anyway. They figured it out as they went. That's exactly what I did. I didn't know everything. I still don't. I'm still learning. but I knew enough to take one small step at a time and then another and then another. Looking back, when I started, I thought reselling was about making extra money. That's honestly all I wanted, just enough to be able to help our family, enough to be able to take some pressure off, enough to be able to go to the grocery store without stressing out. And I had no idea it would become so much more than that. Yes, it changed our finances. It helped us be able to pay off our house, helped me to be able to stay home with our 4 kids and create an income and a life that I never imagined possible, that I'd be able to create just from selling used clothes. But if I'm being honest, that's not the biggest thing. It gave me confidence. Not confidence because I suddenly became fearless. Confidence because I realized that I could learn things that I didn't know before, that I could build something from scratch, that I could solve problems, that I could keep going when something didn't work. And I stopped seeing myself as somebody who just had to accept whatever circumstances life handed to me. And I started seeing myself as somebody who could create opportunities. That kind of thing changes you. You see, for a long time, I wondered if I had gone down the wrong path. Years spent getting an engineering degree, master's degree, then leaving the career, teaching as an adjunct professor. Then I left that too. There were months when I honestly wondered, was any of that worth it? Was it all a waste?
Years of academy training wasted.
And maybe you've asked yourself that too. Maybe life looks completely different than where you thought you'd be today. Maybe you've spent years raising kids. Maybe you've been caring for aging parents. Maybe you've been building a career only to realize that it no longer fits with the life that you want. Maybe you've had to start over, or maybe you're in the middle of starting over right now. If that's you, I want to tell you something that I wish somebody had told me long ago. None of it is wasted. Every experience you've had, every skill you've learned, every challenge you've walked through, it's become part of who you are. Engineering taught me how to solve problems. Teaching taught me how to explain things. Motherhood taught me patience. It taught me resilience. It taught me how to keep going. At the time, none of those things felt connected, but now I can see that they were preparing me all along. And maybe that's true for you too. Your story's not going to look the same as mine, but don't assume that the chapters behind you have no purpose just because they don't look like the chapter that you're living right now. If there's one thing that I hope that you take away from this video, it's this. I didn't need a different life. I needed a different way to build it. Reselling didn't magically fix every problem. It didn't make life perfect. It didn't remove hard work, but it gave me a path. It gave me a way to build life that fits around the things that I cared about most. More time with my family, more flexibility, more freedom, more opportunities to help other people. And even today, one of my favorite parts of this business isn't the sales. It's knowing that through eBay's charity program, I can support causes that matter to me. It's watching members of my community being able to pay off debt, replace an income, or simply believe in themselves again. Because at some point, this stopped being about clothes and it started being about what those clothes make possible. So maybe you're watching this today because you're curious about reselling, or maybe you're watching because something inside you has been whispering, there has to be another way. I don't know what brought you here, but I do know this. Don't let beliefs hold you back. Beliefs that you haven't tested, don't let those make decisions for your future. Don't decide something isn't possible because you've never seen it before. Don't assume somebody else's success means there's less opportunity for you. Don't convince yourself you're too late or too inexperienced or too old or too busy, because I almost convinced myself of all of those things. And I would have missed a life that I'm incredibly grateful to be living today. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking with me, and I hope that this video has done more than teach you about reselling. I hope that it's challenged the stories that you've been telling yourself. Because the biggest thing standing between where I was and where I am today, it wasn't money, it wasn't knowledge, it wasn't luck. It was one simple decision to stop assuming I already knew what was possible and to take that first step anyways. Who knows? A year from now, you might look back at today the same way that I'm looking back at the woman who almost walked away before she ever got started. And you might realize the life that you were hoping for started with one small decision, One listing, one sale, one belief you finally let go of. And if you're thinking, maybe I could actually do this, but what do I even look for? Then watch this next video. I'll walk you through exactly how I shop at a thrift store, what sections I start with, what I'm looking for, and how I decide what's actually worth buying. Click here and I'll show you exactly how to get started. See you there.